I want to start on some data that we have from Travelogic with this big number. This shows that business travel trips departing this week fell by 49.6% compared with 2019. And in March, we've seen a particularly high drop off, of course, due to these crazy fuel prices. Why is business travel continuing to decrease, given that we're seeing a resurgence in vacation-related travel?
Well, I think the decrease in business travel is directly related to how we conducted business during the pandemic, which was via Zoom and other technologies, quite frankly. But, I'm here to talk about the fact that nothing beats face-to-face when it comes to conducting business, gaining new knowledge, and really working with your colleagues. So while we are seeing significant decreases, although the trend is starting to grow, we need to do more to get people back on the road for business travel purposes, and in particular meetings, conventions, and conferences as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think about how trade shows and conventions tried to do things virtually the last 2 years with some success, with some frustration, obviously. They want to get back to in-person, but it's hard to make the case that things will go back to what it was pre-pandemic. What do you think event organizers and other stakeholders, including the community, have learned about the best way to really maximize the value of in-person meetings, showcase the value of those in-person meetings?
Sure. Well, I don't think the fundamentals of the value of meeting in person have changed since pre-pandemic. Quite frankly, being in person is much more valuable than conducting many forms of business over Zoom. So that's the first point that I want to make. And I'd also like to point out that event organizers from very early on in the pandemic have taken incredible steps to ensure the safety and security and health not only of their attendees, but of the workforce that we boast about in this particular sector. So they've done a lot. I think hybrid meetings were a trend for a while during the latter days of the major pandemic era, but quite frankly, I think there was a lot of frustration around hybrid because it just didn't meet the full needs of people that are trying to conduct business in person. So I'm not sure that we're going to see that trend grow. Quite frankly, I think we're going to see, at least I'm seeing in Boston, a lot of our event organizers are actually pulling away from hybrid, and they really want their people back in person, face to face, in the same place.
Well, talk to us, Martha, about how you're making sure that business leaders know how to accomplish that safely. I know that your theme this year is Meet Safe. Can you talk about some of the toolkit and items in your toolbox that you offer executives for how they can keep folks safe when they're meeting in person?
Yeah, well, basically every major brand, meeting and convention facilities across the country, from Las Vegas to Boston, have all put incredible protocols in place, and they've made them very public. They can be found on websites, et cetera. And it's not only the facilities that are doing this. It's actually the event organizers themselves who are putting strict protocols in place to ensure the safety, and things like vaccine requirements where appropriate, on-site testing, obviously enhanced cleaning protocols are in place. Those are never going away. And we all know what the airlines have done throughout the pandemic to ensure the safety of their passengers. And, I think that that's something that's a very positive trend. And we are seeing people back up in the air and back on flights. It doesn't seem to be causing spread. So I think that that's a positive sign. And, quite frankly, we're just looking for business leaders to understand the extraordinary value of being in person and encouraging their employees to get back on the road. We have a survey that says 84% of business travelers want to take a trip to a meeting, conference, or convention within the next 6 months. And we're hoping that trend continues to grow, and that business leaders allow their people back on the road again. It's vital.
I hear what you're saying, but business people also want to not sacrifice the family life that they discovered or rediscovered during the pandemic. With remote work, clearly the lines between home and the office blurred a lot. Maybe business travel can start to be combined with, family travel. So if someone is going to a convention in Boston, they can bring their family along, and the family can enjoy the sights and sounds of Boston while one member of the family is attending the conference. Do you see business leaders moving in that direction and acknowledging that there's some flexibility in terms of how they can package these kinds of events and pitch it to their employees?
We had actually seen that trend starting to emerge pre-pandemic. We call it bleisure, a combination of business and leisure travel. So yes, and I actually think the fact that more people are working remotely lends itself to encouraging people to go to in-person meetings, because you're not getting that face-to-face interaction with your counterparts and colleagues on a day-to-day basis. So let's develop events that that provide those opportunities for people that are working remote, that do want to be home with their families based on this new paradigm. Let's provide them that opportunity to still get face-to-face, collaborate, and make meaningful business connections again.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that, Marcia, because the U.S. Travel Association shows that we're not going to hit our pre-pandemic business travel levels until 2024. I'm curious to what extent the return to the office is tied to the return to broader business travel. Like you mentioned, I kind of wonder if a lack of return to the office is actually a boom for business travel, because, hey, we got to all meet once a quarter. We might as well do a big group trip to the LA headquarters or something like that.
Yeah, we are hoping that that is a trend, that the fact that people are working remotely will lend itself towards more in-person meetings off-site. You know, it's a new era. We all know that. We know that the pandemic shifted a lot of how we do our work, but you know, being in person, being together is still very vital and important, and it's really important to the bottom line of these businesses. And I do think they'll start to recognize that, you know, when their partner or their competitor rather is on the road and they're getting those contracts signed, and maybe they're not on the road yet, they're going to be ready to send their people back to in-person meetings and getting in front of their customers again. It's super important, and I do think the work from home environment actually lends itself again to more business travel.
You know, people have moved out of big cities like San Francisco, like New York, in favor of smaller, more spread out and more affordable places. Do you see any evidence that the airline industry is shifting its flight offerings to account for this change?
You know, the airlines are very nimble, and I think that they will adjust their flight patterns. I'm certainly not an expert in that particular line of work, but I think that they are very nimble, and they will adjust their flight patterns accordingly to make sure that people have the available flights that they need to travel to where they need to get to.
Martha, I know that your priority is showcasing the value of these in-person business meetings. I'm curious, who is kind of the easiest to pitch right now? Which industries are really excited about getting back in big on business travel? Which companies are excited?
Well, I will say that the medical segment is definitely back in the meeting space. You know, in Boston, we host a lot of medical meetings and conferences. In fact, last week we had a very large convention of dermatologists. They almost hit their 2019 attendance number. We had 14,000 attendees in Boston. And, you know, if anyone knows when it's safe to travel, I would say it's the medical community. And I think that they are definitely walking that walk right now. So we are seeing them come out in big numbers in cities across the United States. So hopefully they're leading the way and showing other sectors that it is in fact safe to meet and gather, you know, especially in light of the protocols that are in place across the country.